Rate cut or not is probably the talk of the town, and this is also the question that most of my clients have. If you are a buyer or seller, this is also one of the topics that comes to mind when speaking of real estate in Toronto. Let's take a look, and perhaps I could share my personal take on that. Hey, welcome back to another video on the AV Team Real Estate channel. I'm Antonio and I am a local real estate agent in the GTA. If you have been enjoying the weekly video from this channel, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so that you can be sure with more people who want to get updated on the real estate market in Toronto. Greatly appreciate it. If you have any inquiries about the real estate, don't hesitate to contact me via the first link in the description down below. There are only three alternatives when it comes to the decision from the Bank of Canada: either holding the interest rate, raising it, or cutting it. Of course, most analysts have predicted the rate cut since the beginning of the year, but the decision basically comes down to two major factors. One is the inflation rate, which I have covered many times in the past, where inflation is one of the key factors why they raised the interest rate in the first place. Second, we have the economic growth that include the employment and unemployment rate. This is the key inflation indicators and the target range from Bank of Canada. The data is from 2014 up until 2024, and the blue area is the target range for Bank of Canada. And basically from 2014 it was somewhat controlled, and we have a somewhat high in the 2018-2019, but of course the highest we had in 2022 was probably the historic high since 2014, which is at 8.1. And we also have the steepest rate cut during 2020 because of the pandemic, the unemployment, and people just working from home, and most of the retailers have been closing down because they simply can't get out. So that's why they decided to have a rate cut in the shortest time possible here. After reopening of the pandemic, we have the historic high in terms of inflation. So the inflation went as high as 8.1, highest in the 2022. That's why we had the rate hike. And for those that didn't believe that it would be helping the inflation, well, this is the fact. Since 2022 and 2023, we've seen a drop since the rate hike. Right now in 2024, we have as low as 2.7 recorded today as of April 2024, which is somewhat under this blue area for the target. One piece of the puzzle that is actually solved by now to have the possibility to have the rate cut, one is the inflation within the target range. Now, with the inflation out of the way, this is where the problem lies. In the latest stats scan, Canadian economy gained 90,000 jobs in April, much higher than the average of 20,000 jobs. Many economists for the latest labor force survey numbers. In order for the Bank of Canada to consider the rate cut, one of the main categories was to look at whether the employment rate was trending downward, and also to look at whether the unemployment rate was rising. Either one was looking great. In fact, the April data makes it much more difficult for the Bank of Canada to ignore, where so much more employment is happening as well. Employment for those aged 15 to 24 went up by 40,000 in April, the first monthly increase for that demographics since December of 2022. The employment rate held steady at 61.4% following 6 consecutive months of declines. However, the unemployment rate was unchanged from the month before, staying at about 6.1%. This is higher than a year ago. The more important issue to address is, why does the unemployment rate stay relatively stable and not decrease further when employment is higher? The huge population that we have seen in recent years is the answer. Here's the article from CBC, where this owner of Aso Fine Foods in Toronto told CBC News his company is growing these days and struggling to hire enough staffs. He added, "We're willing to train, but unfortunately, it's been very challenging to find people to work," said Hong, whose company prepares and delivers fresh sushi to retailers in Ontario. The most recent rate cut that happened during the pandemic, by the way, it seems like just yesterday, but it really happened in 2020 when everyone was trapped in their home and unemployment was through the roof. So we did experienced the rate cut rapidly, and guess what? The consequences were rapid inflation growth and skyrocketing home prices. Now, the question is, when the Bank of Canada sees the economic growth of a higher employment rate and unemployment remains steady, why would they consider cutting the rate? That is why we are still having a debate. And truthfully, nobody knows what the Bank of Canada would do because this number changed month over month. I've been saying for most of the video in the past that nobody could really tell you if they would cut, hold, or raise the overnight rate. If they do, they are just simply lying to you, and it is strictly their own opinion. And in my opinion, don't make a difference either, just like anyone who tells you. However, there seems to be a misconception that when the Bank of Canada starts to cut the policy rate, the homes will suddenly become affordable, the large pool of buyers will go back to the market, and the home prices will go back to the moon. Before I say anything, let me clarify that I am aware that many who regularly follow real estate would have expected the cut to be a minor one, perhaps between a quarter to a 0.50 basis, and the truth is that they really don't move a needle in terms of the mortgage payment or whatnot. Even if there are 2 more rate cut announcements, that doesn't change much in terms of the financial of the carrying cost of a property. Mind you that I'm not a mortgage broker or agent, but I do know that most buyers at the moment opted in for fixed rate that might be a little over 5 or an uninsured mortgage fixed rate in the low 5s, and they either locked in for maybe 3 to 5 years. Instant changes for the overnight rate really don't change the fixed rate right away, but rather have an impact on the mortgage bond yield, which eventually impacts the variable rate more. Okay, so now let's talk about thinking that if the rate cut is announced, it will immediately impact home sales and spark the real estate market right away. Let's use the most recent rate cut at about 50 basis points for the past 15 years. As in 2015, the Bank of Canada did in fact cut rate twice, with the last one occurring in the summer of that year. So when the bank made the final cut totaling about 50 basis points in 2015, we did not see a major increase in sales activity that year. In fact, sales activity continued to fall following the cut. It shot up in December and April and then moved back down to where it was the year prior. So 50 basis points in the rate cuts, with the final one occurring in July of 2015, didn't really meet the buyer's demand, and that's the last non-emergency rate cut evidence we have over the past 15 years. One thing worth noting is that house affordability in 2016 was really much more affordable than in 2022 or today 2024. Here is the graph from the Bank of Canada for house prices and affordability. You see, during the 2015 rate cut, the housing affordability index was way under that compared to 2023. If back then the housing affordability was much more affordable and yet the sales didn't take off right away, imagine that nowadays the housing affordability is way less affordable. In my opinion, that would probably be more stable than many would have imagined. My point here is that I don't think even if there's a rate cut announced during June, or if not in July or September, that really doesn't change much in terms of affordability nor impact a whole lot of sales transactions. However, it would change the confidence level of the buyers, and headlines from the media such as the first rate cut since 2022, buyers be aware of the first rate cut, and so on and on. That would probably impact the most for buyers that were sitting on the sidelines for a long time. And for those that do not follow closely to the real estate, that might impact them to flood to the market, or even some investors that thought the interest was too high and now it is the time. Although we know that the savvy guys that know about the real estate know that this small cut won't take effect right away. However, this FOMO, the fear of missing out, could drive the market once again. One last thing, I also noticed that there are many who believe that realtors like myself love to see home prices keep going up and that the market's going crazy at all times to make more transactions. That's really not true. Many realtors, like myself, work for buyers and sellers. In fact, we hate extreme markets. To be brutally honest, we like normal markets so that we can work with buyers and sellers way easier. Well, we know that the Toronto market is an extremely volatile market, therefore people are driven more by fear of missing out than by their actual budget. Bottom line, it is extremely hard to measure how buyers buy through the FOMO. So back to my opinion on the rate cut, it is pretty clear that it will eventually happen this year. But in reality, it won't make a big difference in terms of financials. Psychological factor could drive the buyers back through the FOMO that nobody could predict. I think I have been rambling way too much, but do like the video and consider subscribing if you find anything valuable to you. I hope you have a wonderful day and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.